Hello, everybody. We are going to talk about some exciting stuff today, and it kind of sucks that we only have an hour. So I'm going to just jump right into it. We're going to have an amazing conversation with people with decades of experience in performance capture and motion capture. We have received some questions from you already. I have no doubt that those questions will be answered throughout our conversation. We also have some other things that we'll bring up. Now, I could spend an hour just introducing these people. We have a group of multi-hyphenates, actors, dancers, directors, animators, producers. So what I'm going to do instead is go around the room and ask each person to tell us who they are, what do they do, and give us their definition of performance capture or motion capture. So let's start with, on my screen, Andi Norris.
Hi, I'm Andi Norris. I am an action actor, creature performer. I work largely in motion capture, in performance capture. I've already forgot all the questions you asked. So I also help run Mind's Eye Tribe Action Actors Academy, and we train performers largely for motion capture. The difference between, in my mind, the difference between motion capture and performance capture is that anything you are doing as a performance is performance capture. That includes body capture, that includes facial capture, that includes doing any combination of these two. Stunts is performance capture. Motion capture is the technology that is used to capture your performance.
Outstanding. Rosanna, would you like to go next?
Yeah, let's see. I'm Rosanna Sun. I'm a producer and casting director. I've been floating around the motion capture industry since the early 90s and work in a lot of video games, animation. And what's the next question? How do I define performance capture? I agree with Andi completely, 100%. Difference between motion capture being the technology and performance capture being the actual performance. I will say legally on contracts often when I talk to agents, they define it as performance capture including the face and motion capture being body only, just in terms of contractual negotiations. But otherwise, yeah. Is there something else that I was supposed to answer?
No, okay. I did all of it.
Oh, cool.
Next on my screen is Eji.
Hi, I'm Eji Yared. I'm a lead cinematic animator. I've been working in games for, I guess, about 13 years now. Done a lot of MoCap work, a lot of MoCap directing, working with actors, get really good moments for video games. Similar to what Rosanna was saying, definitely PCAP or performance capture is usually involving face animation as well. You get the general MoCap performance when it's, body, that sort of thing. But yeah, I've been working with MoCap a lot. Can answer any questions you guys have.
Next on my screen is TJ Storm.
Hi, everyone. My name is TJ Storm. I have been in performance capture and motion capture for well over 2 decades. I've gotten to play some amazing characters, and I've worked on hundreds of video games, several films, and I'm also an actor in normal films and television as well. What is motion capture? What is performance capture? Motion capture and performance capture are digital makeup and digital wardrobe. You will wear a very tight suit, stand in a very empty room, and you will fill that room with your imagination and your performance. And your performance will make all of that stuff come to life in a digital theater that you cannot see. It takes hundreds of people before the day you perform and after the day that you perform to create this performance, but your performance is key and they need you. And we want you to know that and understand how to best serve that. Oh, I also am the co-founder of the Mind's Eye Tribe Action Actors Academy. Like Andi Norris said, we help performers do what they love, especially in the world of performance capture and motion capture.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Sych. I'm a principal animator. I've been an animator for a very, very long time. It's been my privilege to work with performance capture and sort of get re-educated on what it means. To me, performance capture is the raw data, the raw material that's going to become something. This take now, starting at the raw, the performers are charged with the large responsibility of giving something for the animators and artists to hook onto. So it is a very large responsibility as far as I'm concerned, and it's very privileged responsibility to be at the beginning of something.
Awesome. Now, our audience today is mostly actors, I would say. And for actors, it's always interesting to know how you get into a medium. As we all know, there is no recipe for success or recipe to build a career in the entertainment industry. And performance capture is just like any other branch of this industry. So if you'd like, I'd love to hear the brief how you got into the performance capture space. And anybody can jump up, or I can pick.
I'll give it a try. So I got in, I started my career as a 2D animator, a classical animator, moved into 3D. And back then, performance capture was not really a thing. It was big and expensive and mystical. And a lot of us animators had a very big disdain for it because we're like, hey, this is what we do. We do the motion. We do, this stuff's for other people. Having to work in it, though, I did discover that it takes an awful lot of skill for an animator to be able to put his animation between two, let's say, real performances and make it look seamless. I spend hours with directors and like, that part's yours, fix it. That part's yours, fix it. So getting into it, I now have a healthy respect for it, and then moving forward with it, getting to direct actors on a stage, and getting to inform them, here's what's going on, and then be able to take that and put it into games and media and see what can be done with it. I have a very healthy respect for it and really very much enjoy doing it.
I'll speak from a performer's perspective. The way I got in was through training. I just started training with people who were working in motion capture and then got referred for my first job. After that, it was largely just making those connections within the industry. And then I met Rosanna, and Rosanna hired me for a job for Resident Evil Village, which more or less changed my career. So thanks, Rosanna.
On that note, Rosanna, would you like to speak to how someone gets into the casting side of this genre?
Like how you become a casting person or how you get a part? How
you found your way to casting performance capture projects? Is it the same as anything else, or was it a unique?
I'm happy to tell my story, but I don't think it's a typical one at all. I started in motion pictures and did casting in film for years and years and years. And then when I was working on the Matrix series, I was asked by the Wachowskis to work on their coincidental video game, which then led me into casting and performance capture and kind of happened after that. But to be honest, most of my casting that I do, which is not typical of every casting director in this medium or this space, I tend to approach it the same way, whether it's for film, TV, video games, or anything else. It's all kind of, for me, in the same block of acting. I mean, there's subtle differences, but, generally speaking.
Let's dive into that. A lot of the questions that we had from the audience were about the casting process and the operating process and how is this different than any other genre of acting. So feel free if anyone has some thoughts on that.
I mean, I'll start it off. I'm sure this does not represent all casting people who do this kind of work at all. I can only really speak for how I think of it and how I do it. But I would say that, for the most part, it has very little to do with whether or not you have experience or whether you have lots of experience or very little experience. It has a lot more to do with talent. It has a lot more to do with traditional kind of casting, whether you fit the role, whether you seem to embody the way that the producers and the creative team have envisioned the character. And that involves the way you move, the way you speak, the way your eyebrows raise, the way your hand gestures are, all of the traditional aspects of acting down to the very, very subtle pieces. I mean, as TJ said, you're obviously walking onto an empty stage and there is a lot of imagination, but it's not imagination that isn't related to the same kind of techniques and practice that people have when they do stage plays, for example, or they do black box theater, or they do other types of acting where you don't literally have, every single thing you can imagine. And actors often create backstories for their characters that they didn't get on the page from the producers. It's similar to all of those aspects. So it really comes down to matching the correct talent to the right role.
I'll jump in there too, doing a lot of jumping. There's kind of a subtle difference between live action and motion capture. Motion capture, you're dealing with a synthetic character. Your data is going to be put onto something that lives inside a computer. And as good as the rendering is, most of the time people can figure it out. So there's certain things like being very, very still, which works great for actor close-ups. When you see that on a computer character, it just means the computer character is broken more often than not. Something feels wrong. I will accept that you're a real person not moving, but as soon as you see it in the digital world, the synthetic character is not moving. The synthetic character is obviously broken. So there are a few differences between how you're going to approach something.
There is actually, that kind of reminds me, I think I've mentioned this before, but something actors might not realize when you're doing mocap is that it bears all. So if you have any kind of weird twitches that you do, or you run funny, or you think nobody will notice certain little mannerisms you do, the data sees everything. So sometimes, say, for example, you want to try out for a role where you're like a soldier or tactical kind of character, and you've never done it before. And you think, oh, I've seen a lot of movies, or I'm confident that I know how they behave. You'll be surprised sometimes, especially depending on the developers that are gauging your performance. You might not really perform the way that like a legit tactical person would. Like, you're not doing the moves that look right when you're looking at the data. Like there was this one guy from a friend of mine that was working on a different project where, as an actor, amazing actor, really nice guy, great performance in general, but he wanted to try for a bit of a soldier kind of role. And when they had him kind of doing the getting ready for door breaches and kind of getting more tactical positions with the rifles and that sort of thing, it just didn't look right. It would look kind of odd. And I think part of that could be kind of worked out with if he did a little bit of training beforehand, or kind of you'd have to do more research to really get kind of a more like legit look to those performances. But the mocap really just shows everything. So if you have anything that could be construed as like maybe like certain characters, we've had some actors before, like when you run, maybe some people tuck in their feet when they run a little bit, but then when you look at the data afterwards, that's something that maybe an animator would have to clean up, or that the director will have to tell you, like, can you run with maybe your feet separated a little bit? There's a lot of technical stuff that kind of goes into mocap that will kind of throw you off a little bit. Because, as an actor, I'm sure you want to be in the moment and really act. But there's a lot of things where it's like, oh, your marker fell off or something. We have to do the whole thing over again. So you might sometimes keeping focused and kind of staying in character can be a little challenging, especially if it's your first time.
May I make a quick note? I know that there's a lot of actors who are listening, and they may not completely understand how motion capture works. Can I give a quick overview? Please do. For those of you guys who are not completely sure of how it works, I know you're hearing a lot of terms like data and all of that stuff. Basically, they're going to hire you as a performer, as an actor. You're going to go to the stage and stand in the middle of the volume. The volume is the capture space, or the actual acting stage that you're going to work on most of the time. It is usually a carpeted, very large floor, and it is surrounded by several levels of cameras with red lights, throwing infrared light out into the middle of the volume, into the space. In the middle of this ocean of red light, you're going to stand there wearing a very tight suit, and on all of your joints, there's going to be markers telling everybody where your elbow is, where your wrist is, where your fingers are, where your head is, all of that. Those little markers, they're soft little spongy balls that Velcro onto you. Those markers reflect white light back to the hundreds of cameras around the room. And those cameras transmit that data to the computers. In the computer, you're going to look like a wireframe character. Like you draw a stick figure, and they're going to take that stick figure and they're going to connect it to a character. That character could look like anything. It can look like Darth Vader. It can look like Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't matter. Whatever they need, that's what you're going to be on that day. So that is the basics, the very layman's terms of what you're going to be doing when you walk in. Now, there are actors who will be hired for one character. They will come in and they will do their character and they will do the thing. Other types of actors that are hired will play several characters in one day or all week long. And you're going to switch from character to character to character very, very quickly. These people are rarer. They're harder to find because they have to understand the process. They have to understand how they fit into the project. But what you should understand is this happens for both films and for video games. A little bit for television, but television usually doesn't have the time or the budget, although it's starting to change. But mostly films and televisions tend to use this. Why am I mentioning video games? Just so you have a broad frame of reference. Last year, I'm going to use numbers that are very close to the actual number, but last year, movies, films, and music combined made about $47 billion in revenues. That same year, video games made about $69 billion in revenues. It is a huge, exploding market. It's basically a film that you can control. And that's exciting to a new generation of people. And that's why it's exploding, especially during COVID times. And making the expansions for those video games is actually easier than making an entire new video game. So they continue that storyline onward. So they will need to hire you as a great performer.
Yeah, just a fun fact for everybody. So motion capture started as a medical technology. It's still used in the medical field, but it started so that they could actually track how someone walked or how they moved and figure out whether they had like one leg shorter than the other, or whether their hips were off aligned or different kind of spinal issues of that nature. It's still used in all of those fields. They still use it in that capacity, but obviously in the early 90s, I guess late 80s, early 90s, they started to adopt it for CG characters in various entertainment fields. And then it's kind of blown up from there because it does give a lot of humanity to certain aspects of digital characters. I mean, one of the things that I will say about what you were talking about in terms of walking, and if you have little quirks and those sorts of issues, everyone has quirks. Everyone has gestures that they make and quirks in their walk. Nobody is a quote unquote perfect walk or a perfect gesture because it doesn't exist. It's all unique to whoever you are. Those are the things that will either be appropriate to the character or not appropriate to the character from my perspective in terms of casting. And so one of the things we do when we do casting is we have people walk. They walk across the space. They may kneel down. I'm paying attention to all of those details. Do they raise their eyebrows? Do they lower their eyebrows? When creative teams are looking at actors and their audition reels, they're looking at all of those pieces because those are the pieces that are going to get on the stage and those are going to either make or break that character. So hopefully, if everyone's done their job correctly, by the time they get to an animator, they are appropriate for the character and they are exactly what you want to have. If someone's not being quite so specific in their casting and they're only casting for voice or they're only casting for look or they're only casting for movement, then unfortunately those people get on stage and they don't quite fit the role and therefore the animators have to clean it up. So from my perspective in the early part of it, and I'm also a producer of many of these things, I think that if you're doing the casting appropriately, then those actors are fit to excel because they are embodying that character and everybody will love it. Hopefully.
I often get cast for my looks. It's horrible. So I'm just saying, really go out there, really study. Don't get cast for your looks.
Along those lines, from the hamster, what sort of skill sets do you think would be appropriate for performers to learn to better excel in this field?
Do black box theater, do theater, do improv, learn how your body moves. Obviously, that's an enormous aspect of just like being able to control your body and understand how it moves. But in the same way that you would for learning a character and figuring out what those gestures are and whether I'm raising my eyebrows and whether I'm turning my head and whether I'm moving my hands a lot or kicking with my knee or shifting my weight in my hips and all of those different aspects. And I just want to add to the concept of performance capture and motion capture. We do not see the actor, obviously. It is data, as TJ explained. And so therefore, anybody who looks any way can be any character. That's the reality of the technology. However, I will say, as a casting director in the last 10 years, I have not had a creative team come to me and be willing to cast someone in a role where the character looks diametrically opposed to the actor. There are far too many creative teams in the world, and I'm not telling anyone I agree with this or disagree with it. It's not my place to decide that. They do not always like to go so different than what the character looks like. They often like to match height. They often like to match race. They often like to match style, body build, things of that nature. And so it does end up being kind of a much narrower box than the technology actually allows. That's just reality.
Kristen and Eji, to that point, does it make it easier as an animator when your actor meets the physical dimensions of the character?
I mean, sure. But I mean, realistically, though, you're not necessarily locked out. Like we have different mocap actors that kind of excel at different things. Like we have some people that are amazing at stunt work. So it's like, obviously that dude's like the go-to guy if we're doing any jumps or falls or any kind of thing. But then we also have people that are maybe better suited for those kind of more close-up, performance kind of moments where, okay, this is the person that we're doing a lot of, face cam or head cam stuff for, or like maybe this is somebody that really excels at like embodying a certain character. Like you might have people that's like, okay, this is definitely soldier guy number 2, like, and he's just always going to be like that guy because he's perfect, like you don't want anyone else. And some people have like that they embody that kind of presence, right? So like if you had someone else do the same animations for that guy or the same performance for that guy, you can visually see like, oh, they carry themselves different and whatever. But I wouldn't say that ever locks you out. It's completely dependent on the project. There's some projects like I just was watching recently. There's this game, The Quarry, that came out where they did the whole thing where it's like face scanned everybody, very one-to-one. It's literally the actors that you see, right? In that case, it would be kind of like what Rosanna is saying, where if you don't look the way they want you to look, you're kind of out because it's like they're really using you and just kind of inserting you into that game. But there's other things where you might be like a 30-foot tall Godzilla creature, or you might be something else where it's, yeah, TJ will know all about this kind of stuff, where that matters less. It really matters if you can nail the behaviors and the movements that they want you to nail. So it's really just a matter of finding your kind of niche of like, this is the kind of mocap performance that I excel at. And then hopefully, getting a gig based off of that.
Yeah, I would add to that. It is from my experience, it's about what you bring to the stage that day. If I'm like, okay, walk over there, and you have a couple of questions, how should I be walking? Would you like a walk like this versus a walk like this? Is it up? Is it down? You're engaged, and I'd rather be working with somebody like that than, okay, I'm going to walk. Okay, what's up? You know what I mean? At the very simplest of terms. A lot of the time when you're dealing with the animators and directors on stage, a lot of us, people who have directed performance capture, especially in games, we used to be animators. So we've not gone to directing school. We've sort of picked it up along the way. And so we're kind of leaning on you guys too to bring something, because we sort of know what we want to a point. But if you can fill in the rest of the gaps, then you're the kind of person we want to work with.
I just wanted to cover a few quick technical terms in there that you spoke of. For those of you that don't know, TJ Storm is Godzilla. He is not a one-to-one recreation of him as a person. But Eji did use the term one-to-one. You may also hear the term likeness used, and that is essentially when you take the individual, scan them, and put that individual, which can include their face scan and features, within the game or show that you're building. Just wanted to make sure that we all understood that. And Eji, you had another comment?
Oh, I was just going to say, mean, maybe it's not always obvious, but like animators are essentially also actors. We, when there's no mocap involved or no, realistic stuff involved, we're always kind of, sometimes we do our own performances or we have our own reference videos. So in the back of our heads, we also have kind of that basis of like what we're looking for. And so it's usually trying to find that nice common ground with the actor and saying like, this is kind of what I need. Let's see how we can get there with you as the performer and me kind of like guiding you to the spot that I can see in like my mind's eye that I need from you. And so that usually good relationships between like animators or directors and actors involves a lot of that. Like, as Kristen was saying, asking questions, not just kind of going in and going like, oh, you want the walk like this, right? And not kind of seeing the feedback. Because sometimes you often won't get it in like one take. It might be take 5 or 6 or something. And you realize that was really cool. Can you do that? But like, this is the bane of TJ's existence. 30% faster, just a little bit faster. Thank you. Like, excellent. We'll best that one. That's perfect.
I wanted to jump on Rosanna's comment. I'm pointing because Rosanna's there on my screen. That theater is so important. Because if you have only trained film, you are not used to moving your body in the same way you are in theater and having control. Because even if you are only cast for characters you look like, right? None of them are necessarily the same. So knowing that, hey, naturally, and this is for me, naturally, I swing my left arm more than my right, but I know that, so I can make my habit a choice rather than a default. And I think that's so important if you want to have any sort of range, especially if you want to go into creature work. And I won't get too much into it, but having that control, especially like black box theater or experimental theater, where you get to work with your body in very unique ways. That's my whole background before I trained motion capture. Put you head and shoulders above everybody else.
Yeah, I would also add to that, like, similar with how animators kind of work, it's almost always better like if you start big, like you're playing to the back of the audience kind of thing, where it's like, if you go too big, we can always pull it back in. It's harder if you do too subtle or not enough, kind of as Kristen was saying before about like somebody standing still, and how mocap somehow makes that seem infinitely worse because it really looks like just there's no data there. So it's almost better if you've had more of like a, not necessarily theater background, but almost have how to overact, because we can always work with that. It's harder when you don't have as much to work or play with.
Does anybody want to explain the moving hold?
The idle is
doing it right now.
Idle, yeah. Kristen alluded to it a little bit earlier. On camera in a close-up, if you're still, there's gravity in that stillness. In a video game, when you're still, the character dies. So how do you fix that, TJ?
So this is one of the things we teach in MoCap Essentials, MoCap 101. It's something, there's 2 basic career paths in performance capture. On the one hand, there's cinematics. This is the land of actors and stunt people. You have to be able to act if you're going to carry a scene through the cinematics. On the other hand, and I'm giving you the short version, but on the other hand, there is navigations, in-game movements. There's in-game movements which you should be able to perform, but you're going to need the strength of a professional athlete to be able to do it day after day, come back and do it the next day. And you have to be smart because you have to be able to take all of their notes and put them into the movement every single time. In both of these paths, and they're very different, but in both of these paths, they tend to meet in one place. And that place is something called the idle, which Mr. Alton has just mentioned. Idling is something that a video game character does when you put down the controller and you don't touch it. You're not giving it any commands. If you push forward on the control button, the character moves forward. And if you pull back, he moves backward. And you push the jump button, he or she jumps. But when you let it go, the character stops. I'll do it. So if the character stops, if you do it poorly, this is what they're talking about. You end up getting this. And in the digital world, that frozen picture looks like the game froze, and that is nothing that you want. You do not want a frozen character in a digital game. It's worthless. It's literally an extremely expensive picture. Nobody wants that. So we're going to take that character and we're going to give it a little bit of inner life. We're going to give it 2 major things. 1, it's going to give it imbalance, and number 2, we're going to give it breath. That looks something like this. Now, what I just did there for 3 seconds, I might do it for 4 or 5, and then the animators will choose or I'll do it for longer, and the animators will choose the part that they think is best, and then they're going to loop that. And that's going to be a constant thing for that character. Whenever the character's not doing something, the character's going to be breathing and be moving just a little bit so that you know that they're waiting for the next command. You know that they're waiting for the next thing. There's other tricks to break that up, which the animators use and which the performers need to learn how to do. But this is part of the learning process. There's a lot to learn in performance capture and the acting during motion capture, but this is one of the most basic things that is absolutely necessary.
I'd just like to add though, there is a distinction that people should understand. We probably back up just a tiny slot, which is the difference between, I think it was alluded to, like stunt actors, gameplay actors, cinematic, dramatic actors, and voiceover actors. And those are each used somewhat independently as well as occasionally joined up, but they're literally not the same skill space, and they don't do the same work. So for example, if you're hired to be a cinematic actor and doing only the dramatic scenes in a video game, you probably would never do a breathing idle like TJ just showed us. That would never actually come up because you just aren't that gameplay character. If you're doing gameplay moves, that's obviously is going to come up. And if you're doing stunt work, that may come up. But and if you're a voiceover actor, you're not doing any of the body stuff at all. So there is little quadrants to some extent that somehow also come into video games as well that are somewhat different.
Thank you for that, Rosanna. That's where the definitions can get difficult because when you say performance capture, there are many different kinds of performance. If you're doing voiceover, you can just be doing voiceover, but you can be doing voiceover in a studio with a head-mounted camera capturing your face. Or you could be doing voiceover with a head-mounted capture in a MoCap suit. Or they could be doing all of that with a face scan and put your whole person in there. So there's lots of different levels. You could be the in-game only doing navigations, which is different than stunts and Fall Guys and gals. So there's a lot to this. And so we come back around to there is a very broad skill set that a performer needs in order to successfully do this work. Do you find as a group that there are differences in the auditioning process? Not necessarily the acting, because we all know that acting is inferred, but the technical aspect of framing an audition for performance capture?
I do. I mean, if I'm casting dramatic actors for cinematic scenes, it's very different than casting stunt actors. It's very different than casting a gameplay actor. There are amazing actors who are not familiar as much with the technical aspects of video game gameplay, and therefore it would be much harder for them to do the gameplay aspects of being the in-game movements, which are highly technical, highly repetitive, often very hard physically on the body, and do require sort of, to be honest, more creature-like ability, more stunt creature-like ability than being the dramatic actors in a scene who are playing, Joe Schmo talking to Kate blah blah, and doing like a scene as if you would in theater. So it is a very different skill set. And for me, when I'm casting, I do not put them in the same bucket. They're not usually. It would be very, very rare for a project to use the same person for all of those different buckets.
Are actors any different approach to a performance capture audition than you would to say an on-camera?
I would like to speak on this, that because I do help with some audition coaching for this. And the one thing I hear from casting directors usually is that actors don't move enough, especially when they're doing like their self-tape auditions. And for motion capture, as we've talked about, you have to move. It's got to be even part of your cinematic. And so you want to incorporate a range, right? Because we still want to see this, but whereas a film audition, you may just the whole thing may be here, but unless it asks for that with motion capture, I'd have part of your audition this close up, and then part of it actually incorporates you moving in the space. So whether that's you move closer to camera so that they can see it, which is something I've done, or I've even edited my auditions so that there is a part of it that is close up and then part of it that's moving. That said, I also highly recommend you walk your characters, because if you are used to I'm just setting this up in specific scenes, you don't have the movement in your body for that character. And because motion capture, you can see the entire scene and you may not know where that digital camera is cutting in. So you want to make sure that everything is consistent and that you are in that character the whole time for everything. Plus you may go audition for Rosanna and she'll be like, walk. And you'll be like, I didn't do it. I don't know. So that's my 2 cents.
Where would an actor find auditions for a performance capture project? Is it the same as anything else, or are there unique ways to find this work?
I can only speak to what I do, which is on every project we cast, we do agency and manager reach out to people that we like to work with and I've had good relationships with. But every single project, I also do a wide casting on LA Casting, and I bring people in, and that process is, coming in, having a piece that you're reading in front of me now. Well, with COVID nowadays, it's often Zoom, but doing a little work, probably about 5 to 10 minutes, probably doing the piece a few times, me giving you different ideas of go this direction. And then that gets whittled down to usually a handful of final people for any given role. And then we do callbacks and chemistry reads. And then there's often a director meeting after that. And then the role is cast. So it's a process, but LA Casting is, I find amazing actors who have no representation, who have not had any experience. I mean, if you guys are up on it, Maggie Robinson, who just won a whole bunch of awards for Village, she was not in this world and had been 3 months in Los Angeles. And she was in LA Casting, no representation, no nothing. And she bombed it. So, it happens every single project I cast. I find incredible actors through the reach of people who do not have that in. And I think that's super important in this world.
It's good to know and should provide optimism to our entire audience. One quick question for the animators. Can you speak a little bit about what Andi spoke of, the digital camera, and how that's different than being on a regular set?
You are definitely not on a regular set because, as TJ described, when you walk on a MoCap stage, it's a big carpeted space with a grid on the floor. The monster or the dragon you're facing is often a couple of apple boxes that are set up just to your left, and you have to be scared of the apple boxes. All right, there's very rare that you have entire build-outs of here's the spaceship, or here's the castle you're going to assault, or here's the cliff you're looking up. The cliff is a taped line on the ground, and you have to act afraid. So that would be the first difference between on the set. The digital camera itself. Most of the time, when we're looking at playback, we're looking at a full body playback. So, whereas if you're on a normal set, there's no normal set. If you're on a conventional set, the cinematographer has his close-ups, and they can review what they're seeing. We're looking at a judgment of how your body is moving, and it's up to our experience. If it's a close-up, we sort of know, okay, it's just going to be this far. And we know what that's going to look like, but you will be judged on more or less a whole body perspective as opposed to just what the cinematographer would want to capture.
There's kind of also, it's kind of tangentially related. You get comfortable. There's probably like a warm up period where you get comfortable with doing mocap in general. Because it's like, as we've mentioned before, you're wearing this skin tight outfit. You've got a bunch of little balls on you. You've got a whole lot of distractions. If you have a head mounted cam, I hope you're aware of the fact that camera's in front of you all the time, and I hit something, or like, heaven forbid, you have a scene where you had to do like a kiss with another character that also has a head mounted cam, and like, how do you? It's like two elephants trying to interact. So there's a lot of stuff to get used to. But when you see that live data, as Kristen's saying, you don't see any of that stuff. You're just seeing the form, like your skeleton essentially doing that action. So I think part of kind of your warm up is also just getting used to not being distracted by all those things, or kind of finding like a good focus point where you can kind of shut all that stuff out and still get your performance across well.
Agreed. I guess it should also be good to note that camera has a really bright light on it that's shining right in your eye right before someone says action. And if you're not prepared for that first time, you just wash that first take, right? Is there such thing as a mocap demo reel, and would that be useful for a performer?
I think it depends on what you're going for, right? I mean, like for creature work and for gameplay work, it's absolutely. I mean, I look at demo reels constantly, but if you're not going for something specialized like stunts or creature or gameplay in-game motion, then I want to see like, what commercials you did and what your voice sounds like and, you walking across the space on a camera. And if you don't have any of that, then I'm going to bring you in to create my own that I can look at. But yeah, I mean, I think it just, again, it depends on sort of the specificity of what you're trying to sell yourself as, right? Are you selling yourself as a dramatic actor? Are you selling yourself as a gameplay actor? Are you selling yourself as a creature? What's the role? What are you trying to get to? How are you presenting yourself?
Would also say that maybe your demo reel might be dependent on what's available to you, because not everybody's going to necessarily let you borrow like video from you on set doing mocap. Like there might be NDAs or there might be certain issues with the company you're working with that might not want you to do that. Some people have. I have seen reels where people do like essentially the before and after. It's like, here was me on set. Here's the final product, which can be handy sometimes because you're usually realistically, there's a lot of tweaking and work and love essentially that goes into your raw data that an animator gets. So sometimes the final product may look nothing like what your initial raw data looks like. But sometimes, especially in these one-to-one kind of scenarios, the end product might look pretty close. So I would almost say for a reel, that might look pretty impressive if the action that you're doing came pretty close to what the final result was. I know some folks that did the Detroit Become Human game, because that's another one of those games that had very one-to-one characters. There was one actor, I think, that did do a reel where it's like a lot of his stuff beforehand and the stuff in scene, in game afterwards. And it's like, well, yeah, that looks like you. And it looks like you're doing your same action. So it turned out pretty good. So I would think that would help your case if you had access to that.
For the grand majority of people, they will get a chance to do performance capture in one of two ways. They'll either go through the casting route and be cast as a character and as an actor, or they will get a chance. And there's all kinds of ways to get chances, but they will get a chance to do it. If you get a chance to do it, you're not just one character. It is very common to play several characters in a day, oftentimes, because there's many characters and many scenes, and there's all levels of video games. Now, the AAA games are very formal, and there's a casting process, and then you're going to and you're going to do all of that. But not everything's AAA. There's a lot of games that are not AAA, and AAA means games that your mom has heard of, games that have huge budgets, and they have great marketing teams. But all the other games, they need your performances too. And those performances for video games especially are going to require some kind of action, because almost all video games have an action element in them. So you're going to need to have in your back pocket just a couple of skills. Now, you don't have to be the master of all of these things, but you should have 3 solid skill sets. The first skill set is tactical. Do you know how to safely and properly use a firearm and make it look realistic? Can you operate in a fire team? If you're working on a Call of Duty or a Battlefield, you're going to want those kind of skills. If you're working on Halo, same thing. You're going to want to know what it looks like to move and live as a soldier. Number 2, swords. If you're working in the Star Wars universe and you want to be a Jedi, or you want to have fights and use weaponry, especially medieval or sci-fi, you're going to need some basic sword skills. Now, you don't have to be Mr. Terrence Rotolo himself and be the god of swords, but you should be an excellent person with a weapon in your hand so you're safe and you can make it look realistic. And there's a lot that goes into looking realistic. On top of being able to go ting, 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 you have to make it look like it's heavy if it's heavy. And that's its own skill. That's a theater skill that you may not necessarily use in theater, because in theater you can use a real foil or you can use a real aluminum sword. You may be using a stick with a little marker on it in the volume. So you need to know what it feels like, what it should feel like, and what it should look like. Thirdly, there are many characters that are not human in many video games, and that is special performance, special creature performance, and special character performance. That skill is not something that is easy. And I'm mentioning this because we see the many people that come to our classes and they're not ready for the amount of information that we're going to throw at them. But if they keep coming, then they get better. And that's what it's all about. You're going to need to train in at least these 3 skills. If you want to be prepared to work more often, especially as many characters, it makes it much easier. Now, you don't need any of those skills. If you just want to be the actor and you want to show up as the character, great. You can do that. You can get cast, and then they'll put somebody else in your skin and allow that character to have the skills that is necessary. But it is that other person that I'm talking about. That other person is not always a stunt person. That person is often an action actor. They have to be able to perform, but they also have to be able to move. And that is a rare combination. And video games are based on action most of the time. So please be prepared for that if you want to have a longer, more active career in performance capture.
I just want to piggyback on this really quickly, going back to having a demo reel, because there are a lot of people out there who don't have experience in motion capture, and that's not necessarily, some places, some casting directors are like, must have experience, but a lot of them don't say that. And really, what people want to see is your skill. So even if you don't have footage of you in a suit, I wouldn't say that it really matters all that much. Really, we want to see that, if you're an action person, that you can do a butterfly kick. That's not necessarily a skill you have to have. I'm just throwing that out there. Or that you know how to hold a sword, or that you can act. So any skill that you have, and especially if you've got multiple skills, put them on one reel so somebody doesn't have to go through, and keep it like, what'd you say, Rosanna, like a minute and a half? Yeah, keep it short. Have as much on there as you can so that they don't have to go through a bunch of different reels and watch, because people don't. I mean, we all know how much
you could have a limp, and for all you know, that's what we're looking for. You could be good with accents, which sounds weird, but I am casting a project right now and I'm looking for someone who's great with accents, and it's for performance capture, not just VO, so you just don't know what is going to be the thing that sets you apart. And I'll just say out loud, I'm really happy to see all the women and people of color on this panel and in attending. It is something that I've been pushing for a long time in this space. And now we're finally getting characters that are fitting those roles. And so, I'm not battling the executives anymore in the same way. So, there are more and more spaces to fill that as well. So please, whatever it is, like Andy says, whatever it is, like I'm going to be perfectly transparent here, guys. If I come up with a reel and I've got somebody who has them in a suit, in a motion capture suit, I am less likely to pay attention to them, because I'm not looking at the person. I want to look at the person. I want to look at the actor themselves doing something that draws them in as a unique individual, and that makes me think, what's that about? That might fit, And if you're just walking around in a MoCap suit, I already know that you can get into a MoCap suit if you're all going to do it. So it's not, that doesn't sell me on anything. So you don't have to be fancy about this. I've gotten reels of people who literally every single thing in their reel is a self-tape that they did. And that's it. That's all they're showing me. They've never had any other experience. And if their voice is interesting and they seem to have interesting expressions, and I'm kind of curious about what they're doing, and they sell it, that's the main thing, right? They sell it, they embody it, then I'm going to bring them in to do a little bit extra, delving in.
Awesome. We've got just over 5 minutes left, so I just want to open the floor. I think we've answered most of the questions that came through, but I'd like to open the floor if anyone has a unique PCAP story or a piece of advice that you really think that our viewers should hear.
I do have one piece of advice, and I tell this I think Andy will know, I tell this to all of the actors I've ever worked with. For those of you who have managers and agents, and I don't know how many of these people do who are on the attending this, but for those of you who have managers and agents, make sure that those managers and agents represent who you are. Because my biggest complaint as a casting director and as a producer in this industry, and all industries, to be honest, in entertainment, is that there are a lot of actors who have managers and agents that speak and deal with people outside of you in a way that you would not do. And if they don't represent you, they're not a good fit for you, because people make decisions about casting you in roles and whether they want to cast you in a role based on that communication, not communication with you. They do based on the communication with your reps. And if those reps are not treating and speaking about things in a way that you would, then it's not a good representation for you. So it's always the one thing I want to make sure that actors understand in general.
All right. Actually, something I want to say is that one thing to keep in mind, and we've told actors this on the stage before, because this is an entirely digital process, we're not burning through film. All right. So if you're up to take 6, take 7, take 8, it should not freak you out. A lot of the time it's like, yeah, we're not there yet. Let's try it one more time. Let's try it one more time. We're not running out to Kodak and trying to find more film for you to work on. Now, does that mean we can sit there and try to get 34 takes of the same thing? No. But often the time it's a process. And if you're loose and you're enjoying and you're having fun, who cares that we're on take 11? If take 11 is the magic, great.
I would also add to that, obviously, directors may vary, but I know when I'm directing people, I appreciate a lot of give and take with actors. So a good director will try to give you as much upfront to inform you as best as possible. Because as I think TJ mentioned before, like it's like, the behind the scenes of the Star Wars prequels movies, where sometimes it's just like nothing. And it's like, oh, in that corner, a big thing happens. And it's like, oh God, what do I have to work with? So sometimes the director will try their best to get enough physically set up. So at least you have something to work off of, but that's not always available. But I think most directors do appreciate when you ask, good questions. You don't just kind of go, okay, this is what they told me to do, I'm just going to do it. If you kind of show that you got some thought process going on with that, and you're like, okay, well, if this character's scared at this point, how scared are they? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, are they reacting to this? What's the motivation for this character at this point? Because sometimes those questions actually kind of almost bounce off me and go like, that also brings up a good thing I hadn't thought before. Maybe we should add this to that performance as well. So there can be a lot of nice collaboration that can occur sometimes when you are an active participant, essentially, in your acting on stage.
Piggybacking on that, I also think it's really, as an actor, specificity is everything, like regardless of which field of acting that you're doing, and you don't necessarily have a lot to work with. And some days move really fast because you don't have lighting setups. You don't really have camera setups. So you don't have those breaks that you do on film. And what that means is that you may be changing environments so fast and you still got to be in that environment. So one of the things I tell everybody who trains with me, that start paying attention to the specificity of your environments now, like how things feel underneath your fingers. How does the temperature react to your body? Like how does your body react to temperature? What do clothes feel like? Because everything that you have, that's one less thing you have to think about on set. If you can just go, oh, I remember that smell. Okay, great. It's already in my head. Now I can focus on meeting all the technical aspects, because there's only so much you can hold in your head at once, right? So the more you can already have established this like backlog of imagination, the easier it's going to be to pull things from it on set.
The thing that I can give you is just a little secret that we like to share with the people who train with us is the people that you're going to be working with, especially in video games. They are nerds of their own culture. They are good at what they do because they grew up doing it. The artists grew up drawing, but they also grew up watching Star Wars. They filled their brain with the kind of stuff that made them see and made them believe. And they wanted to tell those stories. They read comic books. They played video games. You don't have to do any of those things. But if you want a career in this and you want to do this regularly, I suggest that you speak the same language as the people that you're going to be working with. Watch the Star Wars, watch the Marvel movies, play the Elden Ring, play the games, whatever games they are, go play them so that you understand. Because if you've never played a video game before, it makes it a little harder to know what the hell is going on the stage. They're going to say, okay, now you just cleared the level and we're going to do the end. And you're going to like, what does a power up mean? What does that mean? I don't know what any of this means. So know what it is by just playing it. Show that you're interested. I'm sure that most of the actors here have seen, at least 70% of you have probably seen some of the Oscar-nominated films from last year. Well, this is that same kind of study. You are going to play some of the games just to get an understanding of what it is that they're talking about on these sets, because that will make it so much more easy for you. And remember, there's lots of places for lots of kinds of performers in this business. So, but all of them, almost all of them, require that you have a basic understanding of how a video game works. Now, some of you can get away with it completely, but it's so much more easy if you guys can have that shorthand of language. If the person says, okay, you know how the alien, you never see the alien, but in Aliens, if you know the difference between Alien and Aliens, you're already halfway there. One's a horror movie, one's an action movie. They have different vibes. You need to understand that shorthand, that language, if you want to be on top of it and be able to roll with all of it, because there's so much to learn. If you've never done this before, there's a lot going on the set. Like Kristen and Eji said, there's a piece of tape on the ground, and that tape represents a cliff that falls down a mile. And have you ever played with that idea? You probably did when you were a kid, when you were jumping on the couch and you're saying the floor is lava. That's where we live every day. So I want you to get very, very comfortable with being that kid and bringing that passion back when you guys are performing, because it's extraordinarily important. And you actors, there's no slacking for you either, because in a world of action, you're still going to have to believe that the ground is lava, and you're still going to have to carry all that emotional charge for the character that you're trying to save or trying to be saved by. You need all of that to go together. So bring all of that with you and bring your imagination, because it is a beautiful, fun world that we work in.
That is very sound advice. And like TJ said, there's so much to learn. We've run out of our hour and we've just sort of scratched the surface on this genre. Information here about motion capture and performance capture is not readily available to the world, yet it's difficult to find. So I just want to take the opportunity on behalf of myself and the foundation to thank you on the panel for giving us your time and your expertise and providing sort of a baseline of understanding so that actors can go forth and enter this new world and try to be successful as they can. So thank you for that.